Welcome back to Selling Sanity. I am your host, Teresa Concepcion Esquire, and this is a special bonus episode. We are not talking Selling Sunset on this episode. Today, we are talking Jennifer Lopez, Ben Affleck, and Jennifer Lopez's infamous Howard Stern interview. If you didn't catch it, a couple weeks ago, Jennifer Lopez was on Howard Stern after Kiss of the Spider Woman bombed at the box office. And during the interview, Howard Stern asked her, "Have you ever been loved?" And she, in big dramatic fashion, goes, "Oh, no." And what I've learned is it's not that I'm unlovable, it's that they're incapable. They don't have it in them. They need to find the little boy in them. And that response triggered me in a way that made me incredibly irate. And I'll back up and explain why. I was raised by a single parent and also suffered from extreme child sexual abuse from the ages of 5 to 7. And then I grew up around one of my abusers. I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. And although I was externally successful, I had a lot of internal work to do on myself because of all of the trauma that I had suffered. My nervous system was constantly in a, fight or flight or freeze. And it's really hard to function long term when your nervous system is that, stressed out. So I have spent almost every dollar I have earned over the course of my legal career on really intensive therapy. I've been in trauma therapy, I've done group therapy, I've done DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, which, if you have a trauma background, it's really emotional regulation 101 and something I found really helpful. I've done cognitive behavioral therapy, art therapy. I've gone to CODA, which is Codependence Anonymous, and ACOA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics, because even though my mom wasn't an alcoholic, she had a lot of narcissistic tendencies that addicts tend to have. So I have been through the ringer, and therapy is extremely, extremely difficult. There's a reason why they say it's a lot of hard work because it's mentally taxing, it's physically draining, and it's really emotionally stressful because the point of therapy is to relive your past and be able to, explain your past and own your past without your past owning you. And it takes a really long time to get there. And it takes really painful analysis of the lessons that you have learned, that lessons that may have served you well when you were younger, but that aren't necessarily serving you so well as an adult. And you have to come to grips with the fact that, even though the bad things that have happened to you aren't your fault, it is your responsibility to put your life back together and unlearn the bad habits that have contributed to why your life has turned out the way that it is. And so I have taken a lot of inventory of my own issues and my own, neuroses and my own, you know, faults, as if you want to say it that way. But I have put in a lot of work because I was someone who didn't really recognize and understand boundaries because I viewed boundaries as a rejection of me. And, I was always going that extra mile to please people or, to give people everything that I had in the hopes that if I gave them everything, they would, return in kind. But that's not the way it's supposed to work. The way it is supposed to work is you give yourself everything. You pour everything into you. You become as physically and emotionally and spiritually and mentally healthy as you can possibly be so that when you do find somebody, you walk into that relationship whole. and you walk into that relationship not needing someone to fill your cup because you have already filled it. What it is supposed to be is basically, like, to continue with that analogy, like two full cups together, but not one constantly pouring into the other. And in Jennifer Lopez's case, if you look at the documentary, The Greatest Love Story Never Told, you really see a woman who has no concept of boundaries. She genuinely seems to believe that any expression of any kind of boundary that results in her not getting her way is a rejection of her. Case in point, in the documentary, Ben Affleck said he told her from the beginning, listen, I don't want a relationship on Instagram. And then he says, that's kind of like expecting the captain of a marrying a captain of a ship and saying you don't like the water. And that's true. You do have to own what you know going into a relationship, and that's, across the board. However, what you don't expect is the captain of the ship to throw your ass overboard and not even throw you a life preserver. And that's what happens if you really look closely at that documentary. Because here is a man who really prefers to keep his personal life private. And from the very beginning, she violates his privacy and violates a lot of the secrets and intimacy that should be, kept close between a man and a woman, because she goes and she shows all of these music producers and musicians this 5-inch thick book of letters that the two of them had exchanged with each other over the course of their, 20 plus years of knowing each other. And she did it without his permission. She did it without even asking him. He just stumbles upon this when he goes to the house and has to ask her, why are, your producers looking at my book? And she says, oh, this is the inspiration that we've been using. And then he's embarrassed because they call him Ben Affleck. So that's one example of her just being completely oblivious to the need of her partner for privacy, because she was she invested in what she thought was her artistic expression. Similarly, she goes and she makes this album, and it's almost like you're watching a person reliving their mistakes without realizing that they're reliving them while they're telling you what they've learned from their mistakes. It was the weirdest thing, because one of the reasons that Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez broke up in 2002 is because she commercialized their relationship. She made love songs about him. She had him in one of her music videos. They exploited their relationship in the public eye so much that it became this media sensation. And this was before, like, social media. So I can only imagine, what it would have been like Bennifer 1.0 with all the social media that we have now, because back then it was completely insane to live through that and to see the amount of attention that these two people got. And so 20 years later, she's like, I've learned so much. I've grown so much. We're different people, but we're the same people. And now it's time to make the same mistake all over again. And here we go. I'm going to commercialize our relationship all over again. And I'm going to monetize our love all over again. And I'm going to make a music album all over again. So here's Jennifer Lopez claiming, I've learned from all the mistakes that we made 20 years ago, because back then we were too open with the media, and I'm proving it to you by commercializing our relationship and being way too open with the media. And then she decides that she wants to do not just, a music video. She wants to do this weird music video movie. And in a way, you can kind of see that she was trying to be deep, like Beyonce's Lemonade. But really, I think the New York Times called it Lululemon, because it really was just this nonsensical, ego project for Jennifer. And as every single person in her orbit told her, It was not necessary. Contrary to what Jennifer Lopez believes about herself, and good on Jennifer for having a positive self esteem, but the vast majority of humanity does not believe that this woman can sing. If they did, The Greatest Love Story Never Told would have been commercially successful. If people were invested in Jennifer Lopez as a singer, her tour last year would not have been empty and canceled, not because of her personal life, but because of low ticket sales. If people were invested in Jennifer Lopez as a singer, they would have turned out to see Kiss of a Spider Woman. But between the $50 million that she has invested, either between the $20 million that she did on her, The Greatest Love Story project, or the $30+ million that Ben Affleck's company Artist Equity invested into the Kiss of the Spider Woman, because that company produced that film and essentially financed it. She's spent $50 million on 2 movies that featured her singing that were not commercially successful. And yet, she hasn't learned any lesson with respect to either of those 2 projects, because then she goes on Howard Stern and says that no man that she's been with is capable of loving her. And I remember looking at the previews for Kiss of the Spider Woman, and I remember thinking, damn, this is how much Ben Affleck loves this woman. Because if you go back and you listen to her interviews, it was after this whole Greatest Love Story Never Told project was a flop, then the opportunity for Kiss of the Spider Woman comes up, and she goes to Ben and she says, this is the movie that's the movie of my dreams. I need you to make this happen for me. And he does. He makes that movie happen. There were so many other Latina singers and actresses in Hollywood. Any one of the girls from In the Heights or West Side Story or Christina Aguilera or Demi Lovato, any one of those women with real powerhouse voices would have made that movie exponentially better. But Ben Affleck loved Jennifer Lopez so much that he made sure that she was the one who was cast in this movie. And even though he put together this whole massive production, he literally financed her dream come true, she can turn around and go on Howard Stern and say he's not capable of love. Why is that? Because the movie flopped? Jennifer Lopez has this insatiable need for public adoration. And so this summer, she was overseas on a tour, and TikTok, Instagram, all kinds of social media were flooded with clips of her bad singing. They were flooded with clips of her almost naked. And admittedly, she looks amazing for any age. She would look amazing at 28. She would look amazing at 58. She's gorgeous. We all know that. But she's gyrating on stage in a thong and a tiny bikini, and she's singing things like The Wreckage of You as it relates to Ben Affleck, not knowing or not realizing that she's her own worst enemy. She's her own self-saboteur. And so as somebody who has put in the work, one of the things that really, really frustrates me, one of the things that really, really aggravates me and quite frankly really pisses me off is performative therapy. Oh, look at how much I've grown. Look at the lessons I've learned. But you haven't put in the work because you keep repeating the same mistakes and you keep repeating the same statements. If you go look at The Greatest Love Story Never Told, how many times has Jennifer Lopez said, I didn't really love myself. I didn't really love myself. And he showed me how to love me, and he showed me how to believe in me. That's not what Ben Affleck or any man's job is to do. A man is not supposed to make you believe in yourself. You are supposed to already believe in yourself, and he can encourage you, he can support you, he can assist you. But if your whole sense of self and your whole sense of identity is wrapped up in someone else's opinion, it's never going to work, because at some point that person is going to have to, say uncle and say, wait a minute, my whole existence can't be about validating you. At some point, the other person is going to have to say, what about me? And Jennifer takes any what about me as an offense to her. So the very first video that I put on TikTok that went viral was a video that I addressed to Ben Affleck directly because I was so upset and frustrated at this performative look at me and look at all the therapists I've had, and I've surrounded myself with gurus, and I'm really determined to figure out why my love life isn't working out. And I'm like, this is not a mystery that needs 15 gurus. It just needs one person that you pay who isn't hired just to tell you what you continue wanting to hear. So in my video to Ben Affleck, I said, listen, I don't know you. I don't even know if this will reach you. So my goal was, I hope it reached him. I still hope it reaches him. But for everybody listening, you have to know that boundaries are not a reflection of your lack of love or your lack of respect for someone else. Healthy boundaries that you establish because they are what you need to walk through life are a healthy reflection of the love that you have for yourself. You are the only person who has to live with 100% of the decisions that you make. You are the only person who is absolutely obligated to love yourself and to put yourself first. And every single time you put yourself second or third, doesn't matter if it's for your spouse, for your kid, you do yourself a disservice that will ultimately come back and damage whatever relationship you're trying to work on. Because you can't empty your cup just to fill it for someone else. And Jennifer's cup is bottomless. It doesn't matter how much you pour into it. And she says it. They gave me everything they had. They gave me the houses. They gave me the rings. They gave me the marriage. But what she didn't give them is the respect of understanding that there is supposed to be a compromise. Ben said several times in that documentary where two people with two different approaches trying to learn how to compromise, but I didn't see her compromise once. Everybody told her it was a bad idea. Jane Fonda said, it looks like you're trying to prove something instead of just living it. And she was 100% correct. Jennifer's problem is that she wants the world to see, look, Ben loves me. So if he loves me, that means I'm worthy of love. And if I'm worthy of love, then you, world, have to love me also. And if you're that invested in what other people think and other people's approval, you are not going to be in a position to be in a relationship because as Ben said, no amount of followers, no amount of likes, no amount of box office numbers, no amount of diamond carats is going to fill whatever that void is in her that makes her incapable of tolerating someone else's boundaries. It's almost like she wants to become enmeshed with another person rather than have two separate people working, as two individuals and going through life together. So there were numerous instances in that documentary where you just saw her constantly just blow past his boundaries. And she says it. He's like, he's not comfortable with me being the muse, but he loves me and he knows he can't stop me. Well, maybe it's not about whether or not he is going to stop you, but is it possible for you to pause and say, if I'm going to do this artistic expression, is there a way for me to do it without violating my partner's privacy? Is there a way to do it without giving, people who are complete strangers access to some of the most intimate, letters that this man has written me? Is it possible for me to, take it as a sign from the universe and all the other people telling you that this is a horrible idea, that when your $20 million of funding gets pulled, maybe you can just take a break. It doesn't have to be immediate. Maybe you can just be married. Maybe you can go to his premiere and support him instead of being at home crying about missing it. And she was essentially saying, like, honey, I can't go to support you because I'm too busy making a record and a movie about how much I love you. And that's also gaslighting. It's saying one thing and then your conduct, completely telling a different story. So it's, I love you, Ben, but as soon as he has a boundary, no. That's what she said the night of the premiere for The Greatest Love Story Never Told. She goes on stage and she says, I know that he hates that I'm doing this right now. And he's like, please stop. Please shut up. And she says, no. I say no. That's almost like emotional rape. Have you ever, if you're a sexual assault victim, or if you've ever been in any kind of situation where you scream no, no, and someone just does it anyway, doesn't that just get under your skin and into your soul and just make you scream internally all the more? It's violating for you to constantly say no, no, and they say, I don't care, I'm going to do it and you're going to like it. I'm going to do it and you're going to take it. That's not love. Jennifer Lopez is the one who doesn't know how to love, because Jennifer Lopez is too busy trying to prove to the world that she's capable of being loved. Everything about her life is performance. And it's really a shame. It's really sad. I mean, that documentary was damn near heartbreaking. And I'm not even a Jennifer Lopez fan. I'm Puerto Rican. I'm from New Jersey. I stopped being a fan when she came out with The Wedding Planner. And I'll tell you really quickly, I was a teenager. I had a 1993 Buick, and it was this long, maroon, ugly car. But I was the only one of my friends who had a car. We all climbed in. We all went to the movie theater. We saw The Wedding Planner. And there's one scene where she said, when my parents came over from Italy, and I literally stood up and wanted to walk out. And all my friends were like, you can't leave us here. But I was pissed. I'm like, she's a producer on this film and she has to pretend to be Italian. You know what other countries in Europe? Spain. Spain is right there. The entire movie could have stayed exactly the same, with all those, people with their weird Italian accents that didn't really sound like they were Italian accents anyway. All they had to do was say from Spain. When my parents came from Spain, they learned English by playing Scrabble. But no, she had to say she was Italian. When she did play a Puerto Rican, the very next movie in Made in Manhattan, then she darkens her hair and she lives in the Bronx and she's a single mom and the dad is a deadbeat who's not around. And the mom is, someone who doesn't want her daughter to succeed. She only wants her daughter to clean houses. And, Jennifer Lopez's character is like so taboo that a Latina, who doesn't have a lot of money would be with a white guy. I mean, it was the most stereotypical bullshit movie. So you can play rich when you're Italian, and when you're Puerto Rican, that's when you can play poor. So those two movies just made me stop being a Jennifer Lopez fan. So I've never, been on the J-Lo train, but I can respect the fact that if you reunite with someone 20 years later, that's a blessing, because so few people find love the first time around. So when you find it around the second time, it's really sad and frustrating as someone who has put in the work to just see someone just make the same exact mistakes. And she was singing about learning the mistakes that she was repeating. She had a fucking skinny fat Joe playing her stupid therapist. And she's talking about, nonsense without ever really examining her role in the way her life is turning out. And in that Howard Stern interview, it frustrated me that she didn't take any accountability at all for the way her relationships have turned out. So in the Dear Ben video, I said, I'm sorry that your privacy was violated. And I sent a message into the universe because the reality is that representation of Black women, Hispanic women, of any minority, Asian, anything, is so low in Hollywood. There are so few opportunities. There is so little representation. And it's another reason why, with respect to Selling Sunset, I get mad, because when there is just one Black woman on a show, in a show that's supposed to showcase professional women selling multi-million-dollar homes, to have a real person become a caricature of a Black woman is painful. And as someone who's put in the work in therapy, to watch someone throw away a relationship because you haven't learned the lessons, you haven't put in the work, you haven't realized that you don't need to make everything a public spectacle for it to be special. And you don't have anything to prove to anybody. You don't have to prove your love to Ben Affleck is, the best thing since sliced bread. You just have to love Ben Affleck. That's it. That was your only job, and she couldn't do it. So that was my message. I said, I'm sorry that your privacy was violated. You weren't wrong for the boundaries that you expressed. And I hope that, Artist Equity continues investing in projects, written and starring Hispanic and Latino creators. And I left it with a message that said, listen, it's not just women who are abused emotionally in relationships. It happens to men. It's not just women who are gaslit in relationships. It happens to men. And if you really look at that documentary, The Greatest Love Story Never Told, with a discerning eye, you will see a man who's really struggling because all of his boundaries are being violated, all of his desires are being ignored, all of his needs are being brushed off. Doesn't matter if he wants privacy, he knows he can't stop me. Doesn't matter if he's not comfortable, I'm going to do what I want to do anyway. Doesn't matter that he's a premier and I'm not going to support him because I'm too busy making this movie about how much I love him. Nothing that she did resembled any semblance of compromise for him. And that is gaslighting, and that is emotional abuse. And so whether or not any of these messages ultimately reach him, I do genuinely hope that someone listening to this podcast takes heart and realizes that you're not alone in your struggle, that yes, therapy is difficult, but it is worth the investment, because it is only when you can be whole on your own that you can be a true partner for somebody else. This is Selling Sanity. I'm Teresa Concepcion, and thank you again for listening. Tune in next time.